All right. So the first lesson in our discipleship strategy, we call this growth point dynamics. Okay, growth point dynamics. And the first lesson is engaging culture and community. And the subtitle is Biblical Practices for Engaging Lostness. So the first step in the discipleship process is to engage your culture and community. So again, this is so different because usually when we talk about discipleship, commonly right now in the churches, we talk about discipling church mates, right? Or forming a small group within the church. But this is very different because you will be thinking more about your community, your culture that are not yet believers, or maybe believers but have, backslided from Christ and stayed away from the church. Now, it doesn't mean that you will not disciple some people in the church, because as I've said, if you find some people in the church that are potential disciple makers someday, then you can disciple them so they can teach others. But if you say that there's nobody here who doesn't know the basic, you go out of the church and find someone to disciple. How do we do it effectively? So this is the workshop. Okay, when Jesus said, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations," in Matthew 28 verse 19, none of the disciples thought that he meant for them to gather up all those who are already following Jesus and help them to do it better. The disciples clearly understood that making disciples demands evangelism. They knew it. It was a call to engage their culture and community with the gospel. So that's what I've said. When they heard make disciples, their mind automatically went to the people outside their circle. How do we evangelize and disciple them? So here's the question: how do you engage your culture and community? And I actually skipped some part here because you guys know what discipleship is already. You can actually make preaching or devotions on what is discipleship. You are on that Christian level already. So I skipped that part and proceeded to how do we apply that to our culture. So here are several biblical practices so you can engage the non-believers around you. First of all, we pray for people. Okay, pray for the people. The first step in engaging lostness is prayer. Prayer is the greatest weapon that any disciple maker possesses. When you decided to become a disciple maker and engage your culture and community, you entered a battle. And this battle, as we know, is not physical, but a spiritual one. And so we need to focus on prayer. And Paul speaks of this spiritual battle when he said in Ephesians 6:12, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." Our enemies are strong and our enemies are very organized, okay? Very strategic. And the problem sometimes is that we are weak and our discipleship strategy is not organized, not strategic. So it is so easy for the enemy, for Satan, to hinder or really make our discipleship not effective because of that. So we connect to God by praying to Him, and then practically speaking, we do our best to make our discipleship more organized and more strategic, so it has a more effective result. And this spiritual battle demands spiritual weapons. Paul said, "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to what? To destroy strongholds." 2 Corinthians 10 verse 4. So the primary weapon in this spiritual battle is prayer, because the devil has blinded the mind of those who do not believe. Notice that. Why are they not responding to the gospel? Some of them are blinded, okay, because they do not believe. They were blinded by Satan and the demons. We need to pray that the light of the gospel would shine upon them. 2 Corinthians 4 verse 4. And we need to pray and ask the Holy Spirit to convict the world concerning sin and righteousness and judgment. John 6:16 verse 8. So only God can open the hearts and minds of the people so they can understand and accept the gospel. If God is going to open hearts and minds to the gospel, then we must in prayer, ask him to do it. This is why I like this strategy, because they started with God first. They started with us calling to him, convicting people of sin, judgment, and righteousness, and just leading them, opening their eyes by your preaching, by your effort to make disciples and evangelize. And there's a power in prayer, and we engage our culture first and community through prayer. There's a story here. I'll just read this one. It's not my original story, so I cannot say this in detail without reading it. So Jerry Trosdell, in his book Miraculous Movements, tells this story. He said, arriving at the waterside to witness the baptism of over 300 people converted from Islam, I took a position where I could closely watch the faces of the people being baptized. I was quite early, but there was already 15 or 20 people around making preparations, and I could not help observing a very interesting woman. So there was a group of people who will be baptized, and then few meters from them is a woman, very interesting woman. I noticed her because she stood under a tree some distance from the water with a look of happy anticipation that never changed. This woman was clearly full of joy to be there, and I felt sure that she must have some role to play. He thought that this woman could be one of the leader, one of the worship leader, or who will help in baptism. Finally, the candidates for baptism began arriving with an unforgettable rising chorus of worship as they neared the crest of the hill above the waters. I did not speak the language, but I understood the universal sound of joy, of joyful thanksgiving, of people who are regularly and gladly exchanging bondage for freedom. These moments were unforgettable. I had baptized many people over the years, but this experience uniquely had the feel of angels in attendance, rejoicing together with us. Once or twice during and after the baptism, I took note of the lady, the woman under the tree. I kept expecting her to do something, but she never left her place in the shade, never joined the baptism, never helped the baptism, never talked to the people who were baptized, okay, during the baptism. And after almost all the people left, she was still under the tree. A few people greeted her, but it seemed that the people who were baptized did not know her. Now, finally, perhaps 30 minutes after the new Christians had disappeared in the countryside, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked someone, finally, he asked someone, who is the woman with the smile standing under the tree? Who is that woman? Astonished, the person said, don't you know? Without her, none of this would have ever happened. She is Hadhi, the mother of the movement. This is more than a disciple-making movement. It is a prayer movement. And it all started a few years ago in her home when people began praying for us. So there was a big baptism. There were so many people who received Christ on that day because there was a woman who started a prayer movement for all of them to be saved. And years later, God answered her prayers. We must pray for fathers, families, and friends. We must pray for politicians, businessmen, leaders, and members of your community. Some people would walk around your community, their community, praying for individuals and families and neighborhoods. Okay. We must ask the Spirit to break bondages that keep people from hearing, believing, and obeying. And we must pray for courage for us to step up and engage our community. And we first engage lostness by praying for our culture and community. So we start with prayer. And then once we have done that, here's the next practical step. We penetrate our culture and our community. So when we are praying, now it's time for us to penetrate the culture and community. The next step is in engaging lostness is to penetrate your culture and community. Don't worry, guys. I will give you notes of this material after, so you can just focus on what I'm saying. Jesus spoke of penetrating your culture and community when he said in Matthew 5, verse 13 to 14, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others so they can see your good works and then glorify your Father who is in heaven. Now, salt and light are, both penetrating agents. Salt penetrates meat and vegetables. It gives taste, it preserves them. And light penetrates darkness. And in both cases, they change what they touch. And in the same way, as believers, as salt and light of the world, we are to penetrate our culture and community so we can engage them with the gospel and see their life change. The problem sometimes is that we are not penetrating because it's very uncomfortable to go out there and just engage these people. And sometimes it's so hard to do it when you're struggling personally. But later on, I will explain to you how we can make it easier. Okay, how can we penetrate our culture and community? How? First of all, by building friendships with unbelievers. Basic, very basic, but we're not good at this. The majority of Christians, we're not good at becoming close friends with non-believers because again, we're afraid. It's risky. We don't have the same convictions. We don't have the same lifestyle. They have vices. They talk a lot of curse words that you don't want to hear. So it's so hard to be friends with them, but it is unavoidable if we want to make disciples effectively. Okay, this is how Jesus impacted his world. By the way, Jesus built friendships with non-believers. Luke 15, verse 1 to 2. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him. Notice that the sinners and tax collectors were drawing to hear him, near him to hear him. Okay, they were not drawn away from him so they could not hear him. It was the opposite. They were drawing close to him so they could hear him. And the Pharisees and scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So if you are a discipler, if you're a good discipler, sinners will be drawn to you because they want to listen to you. And on the opposite, if you are a religious, judgmental person, the opposite will happen. They will not come to you to hear you, and then you will criticize other Christians who are doing it well. This is what the Pharisees were doing here. Jesus was not afraid to engage his culture and his community. He spent time with sinners. He ate and drank with government officials, thieves, drunkards, prostitutes, farmers, fishermen, women, children, and even lepers. Now, I included drunk there because, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? If Jesus was sitting with the people who are drinking, what is he doing? Okay. Obviously, drinking before is very different from, drinking nowadays. I mean, before they drink wine mixed with water to purify it. Okay. Sometimes they drink for fellowship, but not really, with the goal of being drunk. Okay. It's very different. It's very different to drink for the sake of drinking than to drink for the sake of becoming drunk. Yeah, there's a huge difference between that. But that's what Jesus did. He spent time with these people. He went about doing good in Acts 10. He fed the hungry, Matthew 14, and he healed the sick, Luke verse 9. And he showed compassion to the weary and healed the brokenhearted. So his friendship, love, and compassion with lost people was intentional, and it earned him the name friend of sinners, which should lead us to ask this question: are we friends of sinners? Am I a friend of sinners? Okay, do I have people who are not believers but they like listening to me and they like spending time with me because I'm a friend of sinners? This is the first step, because if we will become enemies of sinners, no evangelism and discipleship will happen. Okay, the Son of Man has come eating, and I've said drinking. Okay, and you say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. So obviously in Luke 7, Jesus was drinking, he was eating with them. But again, it's not the drinking to be drunk, situation. In the same way, if we are going to engage our culture and community, then we must become friends of sinners. We must intentionally and genuinely show love, render service, and build relationships. So practically speaking, how do we do this? Number one, maybe some suggestions. You can adjust the application, of course, in your life there and your culture there. I know it's very different. Okay, this material is based on a Filipino setting. Everyone Everyone's relaxed. Only few people have three jobs. Unlike there, it's quite common. So just adjust the application to your culture. But here's how you can do it: invite unbelievers over a meal or coffee or snacks, maybe in your house or somewhere. Invite them. We don't just always spend time with our church mates. We spend time with people outside our church because they're the one who needs salvation. The people in your church, whatever happened, they're saved already. Okay. uh, but the people outside, they don't have Christ yet. So if you have a few amount of money, extra money, and you want to invest it for eternity, spending time with sinners, it's a better investment. Okay. I'm not saying don't spend time with the Christians. That's the other extreme. But spend significant time with non-believers. Ask them to join you in your time of recreation, relaxation, or celebration. If you have parties, if you have a time that you're relaxing, then invite them to join you. I realized that a lot of them are just waiting to be invited. They want to join us, but they're afraid to join us because they're waiting for invitations. So you can invite them to join you, not only for a Bible study, okay, or for a church. That's one of the mistake that we made. We forgot to build bridges first. We make them take a huge step that they cannot take yet. Okay, like okay, especially here in the Philippines, I'm talking about sa culture here. Okay, it's a huge step for someone who's not your friend, someone you met for the first time. They invite them to attend your church the next Sunday. That's a huge step. Or invite him to attend your Bible study. That's a huge step. And this is what we do when we evangelize here in the Philippines, right? We find someone in the plaza, share the gospel to them, and after 10 minutes, ask them to say the prayer, and then say, hey, attend our church next Sunday. You don't even know what's going on with their lives. Do they have money to go to church? Or where is that guy from? Is the church close to his or her house, or she needs to spend a lot of money to go? So is she or is he attending someone who is sick, so she cannot live on Sundays? So there's so many things that are going on with the people's life. We don't know it sometimes because we don't spend time with them. We want them to jump to the first huge step, but obviously they cannot do it. Now, I think it's a little bit different in your country. So just adjust it, because going to a Christian church there is quite the norm. But I believe you have also more people who really you know don't want to do it, okay, or they are on the opposite end. They're atheists, hate Christians. So it's quite different, but the principle is transferable. Spend time with them. Celebrate your birthday with your non-Christian friends. How about that? We always do celebrate our birthdays with the Christian friends, say encouraging words to each other for years, okay, and nothing wrong with that. But if you want to be an evangelist and a discipler, and if you have extra time and extra money, you can celebrate with your church mates and spend a little bit of money or time celebrating with your non-Christian friends, one people, two people, just so you can build this culture in you to really reach out and make disciples. Or if they have businesses, support their businesses or source of income. They have stores, go buy to their stores. They're selling something, just go support them, just to communicate that, hey, I want to be friends with you, I accept you, I want to be connected to you. When someone is sick, offer to come and pray for them. I always say, don't call Pastor Simply if someone is sick. Based on my history, almost all of them got worse after I prayed. Some of them died. But that was just a joke. But I don't do this more often. But I want to do it more. When I hear that someone is sick, instead of saying, "Can I pray for you?" or I'm praying for you on the chat. If I can go to their house or to the hospital, I will go there and pray for them. Or offer to drive for them during important times, run their errands or watch over their kids, offer to help them work on their house, their car, some other project. Or you can join a non-sectarian organizations of your interests or hobbies. Like, for example, if you like something, there's a group in your place, join that group. Even if it's not a Christian group, then join that group so you can find new people or meet new friends. You see, we don't have friends anymore that we can reach out because we have stopped making friends. That's what's happening here, especially for older Christians like me. I don't have anyone now to share the gospel. I've already shared the gospel to them. Well, then I should make more friends, right? If we want to make disciples and evangelize, we engage our culture and community by becoming a friend of sinners, by showing love, rendering service, and building relationships. If we see the unsaved world as our enemy, we will never reach the world with the gospel. Now, this is a very interesting story or content. Pastor Rick Warren of Saddleback Church was asked how he encouraged his church to be involved in personal evangelism. I don't agree with everything that Pastor Rick Warren teaches, but obviously they're a good church. They have reached so many people, a very influential Christian church, better than most churches. Okay, so and then he gave this answer. He said, Saddleback has never instituted a formal evangelism program. That's crazy, right? So this massive mega church, when they were asked what's your evangelism formal program, he said none. We don't have a formal evangelism program, or if you want to be an evangelist, train this, workshop this, go to these lessons. They don't have it. Okay, it says instead, I tell them to write down what you love to do most. Okay, what do you love to do most? What's your hobbies? What's the thing that you enjoy doing? And then do it with non-believers. This is an eye-opener to me when I heard this the first time, because yeah, this is interesting. That means I can enjoy evangelism and discipleship. I can meet new friends by doing something that I love. I don't have to not do it anymore, and just do it with a non-believer. I invite them. I could still remember in SMCI before, we used to give up a lot of things that we love because the ministry was legalistic. I remember my dad was talking, I want to be a dancer, but I can't do it in SMCI before. Okay. You would not believe this, Josh, but I was actually kind of like the first lead guitarist in our fundamental ministry before. But because the church, or because the ministry was very legalistic, they stopped me from doing it. They said, don't do the lead parts. And my passion to learn the guitar, it just died. And I stopped it. I just stopped doing it because it seems like the ministry before was against it. Okay, but I was thinking those are the things that you love to do, right? And now I'm glad that the ministry have grown from a legalistic standpoint to a graceful standpoint. There's no more rules. We can do whatever we want as long as it's godly, and we can use these things that we love to make friends with non-believers. So whatever you love to do the most, do it with a non-believer. You like movies, then watch movies with a non-believer. You love arts, invite someone to do arts with you. You love dancing, join a dance club, whatever. Okay, whatever things that we do, whatever you love to do, turn it into an outreach. You don't need to start a Bible study so you can start evangelizing. This is what most people are afraid of. I don't want to reach out because that would mean I will become a Bible teacher in my office. That's not how effectively you start. You start by building bridges to them. So if you love to play cards, I think we all do, then play cards with non-believers. Invite them to play with you. If you enjoy watching sports, do it with some non-believers. I remember before, during All-Star games in the NBA, I invite some of my churchmates to my house. Let's just watch the All-Star game. But I can do it now with non-believers. It's the All-Star games. A lot of people wants to watch it. I can invite my neighbors. Hey, let's watch in our house. Stay engaged in a relationship, and it will only be a matter of time. You will have an opportunity to share your faith story. Okay, when you become friends, it's only a matter of time na nga opportunity for you to share the gospel or share your faith story. Because here's what's true. Emergencies will come. No matter where you are, who you are, emergencies will come to your family. Maybe a friend will mention his economic difficulties while you're playing, or the trouble they're having with their teenager or their marriage, while you're watching this movie or while you're eating somewhere because you love eating, you know. Both are open doors to offer prayer. You can pray for them on the spot. You can share your testimony on the spot. Hey, you know what? I also have economic difficulties before. I felt so far from God because of that, but here's how I overcome it. You know, just planting seeds of the gospel in their hearts with a sure foundation because you have built friendships with these people or some humble godly wisdom and advices about their marriage, and you can do that. Just keep your relationships with unbelievers and pray for your friends and wait for the open door. Okay, you can also create an open window by serving them, and there's nothing wrong with confronting them as soon as possible, by the way, but make sure that you do it lovingly. And what I mean is confronting them with the gospel. Make sure that you are good at doing it, because not all of us are good with confrontational evangelism. You know what I mean? Hey, I'm so and so. This is the first time we've met, but can I ask you, if you die today, where are you going? Okay. Sometimes it works. Most of the time, it doesn't work for the long term. Because remember, our goal here is not just for the non believers to be saved. Our goal here is for them to be discipled by us. And we can teach them to disciple others as well. So the chain doesn't break. So we need to make a more stable, long term approach. And I think starting with friendships is a better, you know, opportunity, better way for doing that, you know. And it's not that heavy to do, you know. Discipleship starts with, again, engaging our culture and community, and that begins by being a friend of sinners, by getting out of your comfort zone. If we are going to penetrate our culture and community, then we must be ready to go out of our comfort zone to meet people in their comfort zone. Okay, instead of bringing them to us, we go to them. This is God's example. You know, God went to us to save us so we can be with him in heaven. We must be willing to spend less time serving the saints in the church and more time seeking sinners in the world. Okay, again, this is a massive principle. You must be willing, excuse me, to spend less time serving the saints in the church and more time seeking sinners in the world if you want to be effective in making disciples. But you know, usually what happens, because we have limited time, what happens is that we spend all of our time in the church and with the church people. That's how it is. You know, I understand that part. I'm so busy. This is my tendency as well. But if you will think about what Jesus did, if Jesus is here, he would probably spend less time with the saints and spend more time seeking sinners in the world, because that's what he did all throughout the gospel. Okay, Jesus spoke of this in the parable of the lost sheep. So he told them this parable: what man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. So notice that he did not abandon his friends and neighbors, but he celebrated with them right after he found the lost sheep. So the picture here is that when we spend time with our church people, church mates, our time with them is actually sweeter and more fruitful if we also have spent time with non-believers. Can you imagine the difference of people who are evangelizing the non-believing culture community and just making disciples outside the church, and they meet together? It's very different. There's fire, there's prayer, there's fellowship, there's the same language. Hey, how's the disciple doing? Blah blah blah. It's more fruitful. The difference, I mean, it's so different with people meeting together, but nobody was engaged in discipleship or evangelism for a month among these believers, and they just meet for food or fellowship or another Bible study. That's why it gets dry, boring. You have nothing else to talk about except, let's talk about some movies, or, have you seen this new place there? It's because you have no activities outside the church. So you see, you are actually protecting the church fellowship by engaging the non-believers, because you make the fellowship stronger if you engage in evangelism and discipleship. We leave the 99 and go after one when sometimes we choose an unsaved neighbor's birthday party over a church outing. So there's a conflict. The church is going for an outing, but you were invited for your unbelieving neighbor's birthday party. What will you choose? If you want to be like Christ, you will choose the unsaved neighbor's birthday party because you want to engage them. And just explain to your church, you know what, I'm preaching here, or I'm spending time with a non-Christian, hoping to, reach him out for our church. I will miss the outing. I don't think they will have a problem with that if they're healthy believers. We go play sports with our unsaved colleagues rather than our church friends. We allow unbelievers to smoke and drink in our presence. It's not a big deal to us because we know they're not yet Christians. We organize the church, its small groups and ministries for those it has not reached rather than for those it has already reached. So it's a very different mindset. And we engage our culture and community by being a friends of sinners and serving the lost, not just the saved people. And the third one, okay, I think we can finish this. Yeah, I think we can finish this. I'll be quick. So while you are praying for the community, right, and then while you're penetrating your culture and community by becoming friendly with them, what will happen is that you will get one or two or three people, or sometimes more than 10 people who will become your friends. Okay, because you're now a friendly person, some workmate in your community. So what will happen is that you will discover that there's one, two, or three of them who we can call he is a son of peace or a person of peace. You cannot disciple everyone that you will meet or will become your friends, right? You cannot do it. But there will be few of them that you will notice that are great candidates for being discipled. Once we have prayed and penetrated our culture, we must be looking for the person of peace. Remember this word, person of peace. Who is the person of peace? This is what Jesus told his disciples to do when he sent out the 70. He said, whatever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. And if a person is peace, or a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon them. But if not, it will return to you. And remain in the same house, meaning remain in the same house where the son of peace is, eating and drinking what they provide, for the laborer deserves his wages. Do not go from house to house. Heal the sick in it. That means the house where the person of peace is, or the son of peace is, and say to them, the kingdom of God has come near to you. He's talking about focus. If you meet someone who accepts you, who likes to listen to you, who is a son of peace, then focus on that person, focus on that family, and disciple them. Don't move yet to another person, and don't focus on finding new ones first. If you have found a person of peace, laser focus on that person. In this passage, Jesus said, if you find a son of peace, remain there and do not go from house to house, but preach to that house, saying the kingdom of God is at hand. The person of peace is the person God is working on. Okay, they are the ones seeking the truth and genuinely interested in knowing the truth. They are spiritually hungry. The person of peace is the one who is ripe and ready to be saved or discipled. You will learn later on that there are two ways to disciple. Disciple people unto salvation and disciple people unto growth. So you can actually disciple an unbeliever by discipling them to be saved. And then if they get saved, disciple them to be a mature believer. Many times in the scripture, when God wanted to do a work among a certain culture or a certain community, he prepared a man of peace and then sent a Christian to find that man. For example, Cornelius and his household in Acts 10. He was a non-believer, but God made a work in his household by sending Peter. Okay, but Peter has to meet Cornelius first, the son of peace, because he was a godly person. This was true of Lydia and her household in Acts 16. This was true of the Philippian jailer and his household in Acts 16. There are people around us that are ready to receive the word, but we don't have time to meet them because we're so busy with church things, okay, or with our church mates. We don't have time to reach them out. In the same way, we must pray for the Lord's leadership, penetrate our community, and as we are loving and serving people, we will find the person of peace. The person of peace is the one who is responsive to your invitations. You invite them, they come. That's a good sign. The one who is friendly, they're friendly with you, even if they know you have strong convictions. The one who is spiritually hungry, they have so many questions. The one who has spiritual questions. The one who wants to know more in a Christian study. The one who wants to hang out with you, although they know your convictions as a Christian. The one who shares with you their hearts, fears, and troubles. That's a good sign. You have friends who wants to share their problems with you. Then that's a good sign they are persons of peace. The one who asks for your advice and the one who initiates time with you. That's a really good sign. If they say, "Hey, do you have time? Can we have coffee?" Well, you say, "This is a sign, Let's go make these people disciples of Jesus." We engage lostness by praying and penetrating our community and culture, and by looking for and finding that person of peace. All right, so moving on. Once you've found them, what do? Then you have to plug them in to your GP group or discipleship group, or to your Sunday service. But you see, this is the fourth step. It's not the first step. You have to pray, you have to penetrate, you have to find them, and then this part gets easier when you do that, okay, and more effective. Once we have discovered the person of peace, get them into a Christian study using a provided material. This is the only way for them to be discipled and to be saved, okay, in a formal way. So you partner it with your friendships. That's the relationship part, right? Relationship plus teaching is a powerful combination for making disciples. What we are doing, what the Christian community is doing right now is just one of them. Most people are just all about Bible study. Let's Bible study, Bible study, Bible study, Or most people are just all about friendship, friendship, friendship. After 5 years, the person do not understand the gospel yet. Why? Because they're just focused on one thing. But if you balance relationship, being friendly, with being teachy, teach all nations, it's a powerful combinations of making disciples. So invite them to a Christian study. Sometimes the person of peace is not yet ready to make a salvation decision. It's okay. I have one in my group right now in Albor. We're not sure yet if he's saved because he agrees to what we teach, but when I talk to him about Jesus, he has a different view about Jesus. So I said, it's okay, you can still join our study. And I think what will happen is the Lord will work in his heart. There will be a lesson about lordship of Jesus. Then I can focus on that. But he is still welcome to join our group. So it's really an open group for anyone who wants to come. Maybe they need more information. They need more time. They have questions. They demand more time and further spiritual instruction. That's okay. Invite them to join your small group, okay, or your discipleship group. So there's a lot of things here. I will skip that. Then get them into a Bible study where they can be, as I've said, discipled unto salvation, or discipled for salvation. All right, so invite them, join your group, because you're now friends, right? It's easier to invite them, or invite them to your church service, or invite them to an evangelistic event in your church. Okay, I rarely invite someone who is a new Christian in a prayer meeting. You know why? It's kind of a very huge step for them. Sometimes some people will bring unbelievers in our prayer time in the church, and I don't know what to do with them, because I don't want to separate them. Okay, we are praying. Okay, can you, the two of you, go there and share the gospel to them? And I don't also want them to join the long prayer time of the church, because they will be bored and they will say, "Oh, this is Christianity. I don't want this Christianity. It's boring. It's long." So you see, it's not good for me, at least on my experience here. But you can invite them to your small group, church service, or an evangelistic event in your church. That's not very hard for them. Let's become strategic. Let's not become hyper spiritual. We're becoming foolish with our evangelism decisions. Okay, so let's be more strategic. Put them in a place where God can use to grow them, or for them to go back, or for them to like it, because it's important. Okay, you may say, is it fleshly to say you should like something so you go back to it? No, it's just a practical human need. We don't go back to something we don't like, obviously. It's not even a spiritual thing. It's a normal human thing. You have to like something for you to go back and engage with it. I'm not saying please them, because you can like something even if you don't agree with it. Would you agree? There's something that you like even if you don't agree with it. So that's what I mean. They don't agree with the church, that's fine, but make sure they like the church, make sure they like the people, so they go back. Because if they don't like you because you're not friendly, your content are not really good, they will not go back for sure. And then lastly, you preach the gospel to them. Well, you can interchange them with the step, 4. You can preach the gospel to them before you plug them into a small group. But the good thing about our material is that the first lesson is about the gospel. So whether you plug them in first or you preach the gospel to them, doesn't matter, because they will go through the gospel again, okay, or the first lesson in the material that we made. Okay, so I will not discuss how to share the gospel. You already knows this one. Okay, but I'll just go here on this part. How, or sorry, what does this looks like in real life? So for example, you can use your family, company, or hobby to engage your community. Okay, I have an example here. Okay, so and this is the end of the workshop. For example, so Benz and I, we love doing vlogs or videos. For example, this is what we love. Okay, now to engage the community, we can join a group of vloggers in the city or in our province, right? And I'm not saying we're doing this because I don't think there's a group here, but just an example of something you love. We consistently pray that the Lord will save people from that group. So when you're having a program or meeting with that group, consciously you're praying for them, and then you penetrate the community by consistently attending the group events or seminars, even if it means missing some outings, trip celebrations, or informal fellowships with your church mates, just to spend time with your non-believer friends. And we just make sure that we don't miss Sunday, time of prayer, and of course, ministry practices. Those are important things. So as we get active in the group or in the organization or in the workplace, we can meet someone or maybe a couple who loves talking or hanging out to us, or maybe who loves listening to our vlog contents about spiritual things. And they know that we are Christians and I'm a pastor, but they still are friendly to us. Then I will immediately say they are persons of peace. Okay. And before we invite them to church, we can try to add them first as our Facebook friends. Sometimes this is how it all begins. Invite them in our house first to have coffee or somewhere, or try to help them in their need just to establish a stronger friendship. And then once we have that, we then slowly plug them in to our discipleship group, which meet every Wednesday night in my house. And then we will meet with them once a week in their comfortable place. Like, if it's better that you go to them, then we go to them rather than asking them to go to us. And before or during our D group or GP group time, we will preach the gospel to them. And so we will continue to meet them once a week to finish the discipleship material unit until it is finished. And while they're doing it, we will encourage them to consistently attend the church service and informal fellowship. So while something is going on midweek, and then we see they are persons of peace, we slowly invite them to the church and to our informal fellowship. And once they're done with the material, we will encourage them to engage their community and find their persons of peace to share the gospel and go through the material by themselves or with our supervision. So in this way, early on, we already are training them to reach out and disciple others, so the chain doesn't break. Okay. Now, later in this lesson, you will know who to choose to disciple, because as I've said, you cannot disciple everyone. Not all of them are ready for this, but how do you know if someone is ready for discipleship? In our next training will be, how do you encourage and empower your new GP group members to make disciples so the chain doesn't break? So for example, you already have a disciple, they're attending the church and they're going through your lesson now. But that's not the goal. Okay, the goal is to make them disciples so they can teach others. How do you do that? And that will be our next lesson.